In today's video, we're going to be installing new Enduro joints from Barnes4wd Drive, getting rid of those Heim joints, setting up the axle inside of the frame, making sure everything is squared up underneath the chassis, and installing a new Hydro Assist ram. We got a lot to do, so let's get started. Now, since I rebuilt this rear track bar mount on the frame and the axle side, shortened up the track bar itself, we need to recenter this rear axle. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the frame, the chassis, onto jack stands at ride height, and then get the axle at ride height with the tires off so we can access all the joints and everything. We're going to use a plumb bob measuring the frame down to the floor of the garage. We're going to mark the floor of the garage, find the center of the chassis on the ground. So we got everything marked, center line of the rear, and then I ended up measuring the front, because you're going to have to do that, measured the center of the front of the chassis, and I used this nice white box to mark it so I can shoot the laser all the way down to that center line in the front. And now we can clearly see that our rear axle is off by, looks like about a half an inch, 3/4 of an inch. So now all we got to do is just loosen this and lengthen this to center the rear axle. It's pretty simple. So the axle is not actually moving. As I was lengthening this did not change. The axle stayed in the same spot, and the frame, the chassis, is moving that way. So what I'm going to do is measure this here, which is half an inch off. And then I have my mark on the ground here. I'll just mark on the ground a half an inch. Then we'll just use the plumb bob. That's about it. Also, what we could do is, because the jam nuts didn't move, I can measure how much the jam nuts, the space here. So that is a 1/4 inch that it has moved on this side and a 1/4 inch on the other side. So between those two, we got a half an inch. So this is where I'm going to lock it down. So before we go and throw on these Enduro joints, I just want to explain real quick why I'm switching to these. This is the Barnes4wd Drive 1.25" Heim joint. This is the strongest joint that you can get for, rock crawling. This is what people use. This is what I've used on my rock crawler. This is what I chose for this, until I realized it's not really what I wanted. This is about $55 per joint themselves, and like I said, they're the strongest. They do have some downsides, which I'm noticing a lot driving this S10. One being they're noisy. They get a lot of dust and dirt inside of them, and can require some maintenance, like cleaning of the joint. Since there's no boots or anything keeping the dust and dirt out, you have to keep them clean, and then use a dry lube like this liquid wrench dry lube with ceramically reinforced PTFE. WD-40 makes a dry lube, just a dry lube that's not going to attract more dust to your joint. So that being said, with these joints being the strongest, comes with them transferring the most harshness, the most force back into the chassis, into the frame. So if I'm doing high speed on a dirt road, I'm feeling all of it through the suspension, through the frame, and back into my butt and into my back. It's definitely noticeable. On the rock crawler, where I trailer it, barely drive it on the road at all, not a big deal. It's nice having this super strong joint. But having this Enduro joint is the best of both worlds. It has a polyurethane bushing inside of it that's greasable, rebuildable, and it has this spherical bearing on the inside, which gives it the flex that I want for the rock crawling. So this, instead of transferring all of the road harshness and everything through the links, through the frame, and back into my butt, into my back, this polyurethane bushing on the inside will take some of that harshness. Now, there is some downside to this as well. One being they're a little bit more expensive. They're about $65 a piece, $10 more each than the Heim joint. And when you're buying all these links to build a 4-link or 3-link, that does add up for sure. And then This grease zerk is a special low profile one, which I really do like because the ones that normally come with these are not low profile and they get smashed and destroyed on stuff and rocks, and then you're never able to grease them again, which is not good. So you will have to get a special grease fitting which will allow you to grease it. I already had this one because I have RCV joints, and this is the same adapter for the RCV joint. So those of you that have that, you already got this. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, make sure you check out Barnes4wd Drive, big sponsor of the channel. Use the link in the description, give you 10% off automatically, or use the code MuddyBeers at checkout. So we are going to install all this stuff and then see if it makes a difference. When you're installing joints like this, make sure that you're using anti-seize on all of the threads. Also, I'm pre-lubricating, pre-greasing all of these joints as well. Another thing of note that I forgot to mention earlier is that you can see the shanks on these Enduro joints are pretty much double the length. It's going to give you double the engagement into your link, which I really like. Got the rear done with all of our joints installed. Couple things of note: the threads on this Heim joint go up a 1/4 inch closer to this mounting hole right here. So these stop here and the Heim joints stop up here. So these have a 1/4 inch longer throw on them at the shortest setting, which could be an issue, which I had in this top link, because this top link was already as short as it could go. So now this top link is a 1/2 inch longer than it was originally. There's nothing I can do about it unless I want to cut the bung out of this one, take an inch out of it or whatever it is, and then re-weld it all back together. Don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do is, or what I actually did, is I lengthened the lowers by a 1/2 inch, because if I didn't do that, my pinion angle would be way off. Those of you that have been around for a while, you know I really like to use my laser over here and to get everything square, and that's the case here as well. We're just using a common place on the back of the frame, which is going to be these rear holes, shooting it all the way across, and then I'm going to measure from there to the rear of the axle on both sides, making sure that is the same distance from the back of this hole on the frame, which should be the same side to side. And then, I mean, it's pretty simple. Okay, so we ended up at 30 5/8 with just a tiny bit above 30 1/2. And then we'll double check our driveline angle, and then we will lock everything down. We should be good to go. So we got 11.6 degrees on our pinion yoke, and then on our driveline, depending on kind of where I put it, 11.6, 11.5. So we want these to be matching. So we know this is 0 angle. So if you have a leaf spring or a different type of suspension, there's different specifications. Adam's Drive Shaft has a really good kind of picture diagram of how you want to set these up. In my case, with the coil spring suspension, we want it to be pretty much zeroed out, which is pretty much where we got it, as good as I'm going to get it with my equipment. And we are square side to side now using that laser, so we can lock everything in. And I know everything in the whole rear of this truck is squared up. Pinion angle's good, everything is good. The process for setting up and straightening out the front end is exactly the same as the rear, just using the laser, plumb bob, marking it on the floor. So we're going to move on, and we're going to start addressing the hydraulic ram that's super loose and causing a little bit of steering issues. This is the new ram that I ended up going with. This is the redneck ram, not sponsored in any way. I just went on their website and bought it. Even though they are more expensive, they are fully rebuildable and joints are replaceable, unlike the surplus ram that's on this thing. That is, nothing is replaceable on it, nothing is rebuildable on it, which is why, because the Heim joints went bad in it, I have to replace the whole thing. The only downside of that is the holes, the bolt holes on the ram mounts are 3/4 inch bolts, and these guys are 5/8. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut the nuts off of all the mounts, and then we're gonna have to plate the mounts and drill out 5/8 hole to make the ram mounts fit the 5/8 bolts, and then we can go ahead and just bolt this in, make sure everything is all good, and then go from there. So this side is super easy. Just cut, weld, grind, drill holes, and we got ourselves a 5/8 instead of 3/4 inch hole with our nut welded on the outside right there. That's all ready, good to go. The more difficult side will be this one right here. So we need to build a plate that's going to cover this right here, and then there's a nut welded on the back side. That 3/4 inch nut, I'll need to cut that off and then somehow weld a plate on that side with another nut. So I'm going to cut that off and go from there. So my idea is this will be fairly easy to weld the plate on this side, but the back side, if I make the plate bigger than this, I can weld it on at least 2 surfaces, 1, 2. So half of it is fully welded on, and then with it being clamped down with the bolt on this, which is fully welded, it's never going to go anywhere. There's going to be no issues with it. So these are the brackets that we're going to be using. This guy right here, and then this guy right here, which will have our nut welded on the back side of it. So this is going to go through the old one and then weld all through there. So I just need to put this into that bracket and make sure everything is fitting properly and tack it all together. Make sure I can get the bolt in and out easily, and then fully weld it in. So this is the old ram. You can see how much movement we have in this side, and this side is also the same. Okay, we got the redneck ram completely installed. When you're setting that up, you have to account for the throw of your steering gearbox, because if you overextend your steering gearbox with the ram, you can break this sector shaft of your steering gearbox. And then you also have to take into account, so this guy right here, this Dana 44, this knuckle has a steering stop right here that goes up against this inner C knuckle right here. So at full left turn, it touches this, and it is exactly at 7 inches of throw out there, and the steering gearbox is not fully maxed out, which is what we want, because that would be super easy to break a gearbox with the ram, and then also to break a knuckle or ball joints, because if you're pushing up against this and then the ram keeps pushing against it, the force is going to go somewhere. You're going to blow out your ball joints and your knuckle and all that stuff, and that would be bad news. So you don't want to do all of that. Everything's tightened up. We have no leaks. I did notice that this Heim joint right here on the axle side is bad. The bolt is not loose, but the whole axle, you can see the whole axle when you turn just clunks back and forth, and I just verified it is 100% that Heim joint. I believe I have another one, so we'll go ahead and swap that out to make everything nice and tight here in the front end. That'll be another reason why the front end is wandering a little bit. I got the track bar out. This is the front track bar, and we have a few issues. One being this misalignment spacer is in two pieces. It's broken. I don't really know how that happened. And then our bolt right here is a 5/8, and it is pretty darn loose in there. And yeah, that might be one of our issues. I also went over to the bolt hole on the axle itself and measured the diameter of the bolt hole because it seemed kind of big. So the bolt hole is 0.644, 0.624. So that's a 5/8 bolt. So the bolt hole is a little bit too big. I don't really know how that happened, or maybe it's ogged out. It looks perfectly center. It is loose in here. So I'm going to see if I can find a new Heim joint and new misalignment spacers, and that will help a little bit. But obviously the bolt hole is too big, and that is always going to be an issue. So I was going through my spare parts and stuff. I do have some Heim joints and some misalignment spacers. They would work in this particular application, but the Heim joint's fine. It's not loose or anything. The issue is if I want to go to a 3/4 inch bolt hole and use the 3/4 inch bolt, I need a 3/4 inch drill and or reamer, and I don't have one, and I don't want to go buy one right now. So my other option is to basically, I found two, not new, but used ones, the exact same one that broke in half here. I really have no idea how this broke in half. Like, it's super strange. I guarantee you between this being broken in half and then the bolt hole being slightly too large is causing a twofold issue. So what I'm going to do is I have two newer misalignment spacers that I'm going to put into it, and I'm just going to reassemble it, and I'm going to see where we're at. And noting that in the future I will definitely need to either plate that to make it a true 5/8 hole, or drill it out, ream it out up to a 3/4 inch hole. And I mean, even with the reamer, you're not going to get it perfect. They tend to be a little bit big, kind of ream it out a little bit too much. So we might run into the same issue with it being slightly too big if I go to 3/4. I have brand new misalignment spacers that feel much tighter, but they're too tall. Like, there's too much height to them. And then we're going into, do I grind them down to make them fit the right size? It's just, I'm just going to put these new ones in, and then put it back together, and then continue on. So the battle up here is our pinion angle versus our caster. Now, this axle that Nate built, he set it up basically with 0 caster, which means all of our brackets on the axle, you can see how this is straight, you can see how it's not straight. And that is why the coil springs are kind of curved like this, is because this was set up as 0 caster, and obviously on a street rig, I can't run 0 caster. I think I'm about 8-ish degrees caster right now, positive, which is giving me this kind of harsh pinion angle. So right now, or at least before I redid all of this just now, this pinion angle was not binding all the way through the suspension travel, up and down. It had free spinning. It did not bind at all. We got our little angle finder right here. You want to make sure you're zeroing out on the frame, because you don't want the angle of the ground, you want the angle of this axle compared to the truck, the chassis itself. So we're about 4.2 degrees of caster, which is even a little bit lower spec than factory. I think factory is like 5-ish. I know this is not a perfect flat spot, but this comes right off the top of the knuckle. I think when I started, I remember it was like at 8. We're gonna need to shorten this upper one. It's hard to do this one-handed. So I ended up getting it at 7 degrees of caster, and as you can see, this pinion angle is much worse than it was before, but that's okay. I already know that like at 8 degrees here, we're still good on that pinion angle. So this is where I'm going to lock everything down in the front, and then we can go for a test drive. Well guys, it's been over a month since I filmed what you guys just saw. I just wanted to share with you guys because I thought it was a lot of really good information on, you know, issues that you might have and how to resolve them, how to fix them, and work through it. The Enduro joint upgrade made a huge difference in this particular vehicle, being driving on the street, a lot of forest road miles, and the rock crawling. So they perform really awesome in absorbing a lot of that road harshness that's coming through those links. Those polyurethane bushings inside of the spherical ball or outside the spherical ball took a lot of the vibration out of it. Like, it was an immediate noticeable difference in the ride quality in the S10 for sure. So in my opinion, the $10 more per joint, totally worth it if you're going to be ordering a 3-link kit, 4-link kit, and you're building a vehicle similar to mine. Even if it's a rock crawler and you just want a little bit better ride, definitely go with the Enduro joints. Definitely worth it for sure. I'm fixing still a bunch of stuff, just trying to fine tune this thing. I have over 300 miles, 2 4-wheeling trips on this thing, and we're gonna fix some more stuff. That's why we have this thing apart again. So the next video, we are gonna be fixing that curved front coil spring because I don't like it. It is an issue that we need to address. And then this front track bar right here, we're having more issues with that. One being the Heim joints are so squeaky. It's making so much noise. It is terrible. Here, you guys can hear it right here. But that's an easy fix. Barnes 4-wheel drive, sending me new Heim joints, new misalignment spacers for this front track bar so we can fix that. That won't be an issue anymore with the noise and the looseness of these misalignment spacers. Fixing that in the next video. So if you guys learn anything from these videos, make sure you like, subscribe, do all the stuff you're supposed to do on YouTube. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at muddybeards4x4. We got a website, we got shirt stickers, stuff like that, muddybeards4x4.com. Make sure you check out Barnes 4-wheel drive. Use the code MuddyBeards for 10% off, or use the link in the description. It automatically gives you 10% off your purchase when you check out. Till next time, guys, we will see you out on the trail.